On the rig front, my Bloodworm gear is super simple, and I only really have two patterns of float and two styles of Bloodworm rigs that cover all the eventualities of that kind of fishing. One is ligging on, holding a bait still, fishing for bigger fish, and the other is fishing quickly, trying to be as efficient as you can, catching large numbers of smaller fish. So to show you the bigger fish sort of holding a bait still rig to start with, you'll notice the float pattern itself is quite long, and that's because I want it to be stable. And to add to stability, I've got a thick wire stem, really long. Again, it just sort of nails it there, especially in rough conditions. A round body, so it doesn't ride up when you're trying to hold it still, sat there on your spray bar. And I've got a medium thickness fiberglass bristle, and that's important because I need to read indications on it and see it, especially in poor winter lie. Often people say Bloodworm floats, you need really thin tips, and for me, unless I can see it, it's absolutely no use whatsoever. So pick something you can see, but it does need to be sensitive, and that's why I've gone for fiberglass, because it can be quite thick, but it's still really sensitive. So the float pattern for sort of skimmers, bream, bigger fish, waiting for bites, that's what I go for. And the rig itself is shotted. I've got a pattern that I always mention it because it wasn't me who come up with this, it was Will Raisin. And he showed it me 5 or 6 years ago now when we were away on a World Champs, and I use it for all my skimmer fishing, holding a bait still, and it's a bulk around 40 centimetres from the hook length loop, and I've got a taper of 6 droppers below it. Now I match them shot sizes to the size of float, so on a 4x14s or a 4x16s I'll have a bulk of number 9s and then 6 number 10s spread below it. On a 4x18s or a gram, I might change them droppers for number 9s, and anything over a gram, I'll just use number 8s. And the whole idea of it is that you've got that line of lead underneath the bulk that'll pin that bait to the bottom. But when a fish does pick up your hook bait, because you've got so much lead down the line, you'll see an indication. It'll move the shot, move your bulk, and you'll see a lot of indications on it. And I love that rig that Will showed me for holding a bait still, especially bloodworm fishing, for bigger fish. And normally when I'm targeting skimmers, bream and quality fish, I tend to use an F1 pellet hook. Sounds crazy using a pellet hook for bloodworm, but generally I'm fishing baits like a pinky and 2 or 3 bloodworm or a big bunch of bloodworm on the hook. So an F1 pellet's got that wide gape, but it's still very lightweight and thin wire, so you don't burst the bloodworm, and it's lightweight for skimmers and stuff to suck it up. And normally just a plain old 6-inch hook length of probably 0.8 to 0.12 depending on how good the fishing is, and I tend to use pure fluorocarbon for all the bloodworm hook lengths. It doesn't twist and spin up when you're shipping in and out fast. A main line on my ligging rig is always 0.13 N-gauge, nice and durable. Tend to be using heavier, bigger floats, and the beauty of using a little bit thicker main line is when you've spent all that time making a rig up, you can wrap it back on a winder for another session without worrying about it. Now, the other float pattern that I use for bloodworm fishing, like I mentioned, is for busier fishing, lots of fish, catching numbers of roach and smaller fish, which you often do on canals, and you can do it on commercials as well, fishing closer in. And the float pattern is suited to that. It's got a carbon stem rather than a wire, and the reason for that is because I'm in and out a lot. I don't know about you lot, but I'm quite clumsy, and I often get wrap overs and tangles, whereas a carbon stem float doesn't flick over as often when you ship it in and out. It just reduces tangles, makes you a bit more efficient. And the body shape's sort of an elonged pear, so that when I lower it in, the main body will settle and the float will set quickly, because I'm going to be dropping my bulk in, lowering the float down and dropping it in and hoping for a bite within a few seconds. So you need that shape of float so that your float sets quickly. You don't want a fish to have eaten your bait and be pulling on your rig while your float's still settling. You can't be as efficient like that. So that shape of float's perfect for fishing quickly. And again, it's got that sort of medium, thin to medium fiberglass bristle on there. And the rig itself for this is different to the skimmer, bream, big fish rig, because I want to get that bait down quickly into the killing zone, drop the rig in and hook a fish. So it's a simple bulk 30 centimetres from the hook length loop, and then 2 number 9 droppers. And the reason for them big droppers, even with a 0.4, 0.6 of a gram float, is that when a fish does pick up your hook bait and move a number 9 shot, it'll register a bite really quickly. If you've got little faffy number 13, 12, 11 droppers, a fish will move them, but you won't see the bite as quick, so you don't catch as quickly. So nice and positive. A bulk, 2 big droppers, number 9s. If I go above a gram, I'd change them for number 8s. And then I have a 6-inch hook length, but a little bit of a different hook on this one. Because you're fishing for smaller fish, you do need a smaller hook. And that's why I always go for an F1 maggot pattern for this. They've got quite a long straight point, and that shape hook works perfectly when you're fishing quickly for them small fish. And generally for roach and smaller fish, I do like to fish lights. Normally an 0.8 or an 0.10 millimetre hook length for that kind of fishing. So 2 rigs. A final thing I will say, and I've touched on it, is on all my rigs I do like to have the float dotted quite far down, and something I can't live without for bloodworm fishing is a few number 13 microcubes that I just use to dot that bristle down. You might have heard me talk about trimmer shots before, but if you haven't, I literally shot my floats in my shotting tube to the bristle, and then I'll add 2, 3, 4, even 5 microcube 13s just to take it down to a pimple. So there you go. That is 2 bloodworm rigs that cover me for most of my fishing. If I'm brutally honest, all over Europe I've used them same patterns. Both got a different use, but both really effective. Some fishing with bloodworm and joker is on natural venues where of course barbed hooks are allowed, and if that's the case I've got 2 patterns that cover most of my fishing for that. For more finesse work I like the super fine pole specials. They've got a longer shank, so when you're catching large numbers of small fish, you can unhook them really easily, and it also makes hooking bloodworm very, very easy. You can hold that shank of the hook and get it on super fast. A little bit like the F1 maggot hooks that I've talked about, but they've got that little micro barb on to just keep a few extra fish and your bait on the hook. And then if you are fishing a little bit heavier for bigger fish, skimmers, bream, that kind of thing, with bunches of bloodworm, maybe you're fishing casters, maggots and pinkies over the top of it, then the normal pole specials are absolutely perfect. They've got a little bit thicker wire on them, they've got a bit more strength to them, and they're generally a bit bigger. And for me, I tend to stick to 18s and 20s in the super fines, and a 14 and a 16 in the pole specials. And them 4 patterns pretty much cover me for all my natural venue bloodworm fishing.